we're building a whole picture, and at the end we're going to end up with the Q&A, like I said. But if you're a parent in the room, you might be hearing, this is my child. Or if you're a teacher from Ignite, you're going, oh, it's this kid or it's that kid. And hopefully we're building a picture that's going to help you to help the children in your world and adapt, like Chantal said, which is key. Whether it is in your home or whether it is in a classroom, we need to adapt to the individuals that we're working with. These are children, it's not one size fits all. But next up we have Sam. Sam is here from Midrand. She is also an OT who ran her own practice in Nelspruit, and she's moved across to Midrand, and she's going to talk to us about the normal developing child. So we've heard some of the extremes. Now we're going to hear the average children. But there's no normal. I just have to say that. I just have to get it off my chest. None of us are normal. You good?
Yep, let me just see that. Here we go.
Okay, let's give her a clap while she figures out her computer.
Hello. Thanks, Steve. Well, I hope you guys are concentrating well and you've learned a lot of information. So I'm going to do this in true OT style, just like Chantal. Before I introduce anything or start talking to you, I again want you all to stand up, please. Got to get the wriggles out, guys. Do you want to sing it, Andy? Okay. There we go. Everybody shake it. Shake it up. I want you to walk on the step. Okay, and turn around. Touch your nose. Touch your knees. Touch your toes. Reach up and wriggle your fingers. Okay, good. Good warm up. Now you can sit down. Okay, so my name is Samantha. I am an occupational therapist. I mainly work with 0 to 5-year-olds, but as a pediatric OT, you actually see anyone between the age of 0 and 18. We do focus a lot on the 0 to 12 age, but adolescence is also part of the group of people that we see. So I focus mainly on the developmental side and a bit of schooling. So I'm going to unpack that a bit. Okay, so childhood development. Okay, we all know the term development. You start somewhere and you end up somewhere else. You start one place and you build and you build and you build and you build until you reach your goal or your final picture. So like a building, we have lots and lots of little bricks. And we build and we build and we build until we have a wall. So this is the same with child development. We have a wall of development, and we start at the bottom with really basics, and we build a good foundation, and then we build and we build and we build until we reach a stage where we can function as an adult, but development doesn't stop there. We keep developing until the day we reach 100 years old. We've got information, we've got skills, we've got relationships, we've got a whole wall full of information that gets us from birth all the way to 100 years old, death. Sorry, whenever. So we start and we carry on. So we have infancy, which is your very early years. So you start as what we classify a neonate, which is the day you're born until you leave the hospital. So that's your tiny little babies, and often your premature babies. So babies who are born quite early, before their expected due date, they are considered neonates. Then we have our infant, which is from when you leave the hospital till when you turn 1 year old. So that's your infant years. Then you have your toddler, which is 1 to 3 years. Your preschooler, which is 4 years old to 6 years old, and that gets you up to about grade R. And then your school-age child, which is ages 6 to 12. Then you go into adolescence from 12 to 18. Okay, so development continues throughout life, and it happens at different rates. So we have developmental norms, which is your guideline. This is the average. So they've done lots of studies and lots of observation to say, okay, at roughly 6 months old, a baby should be sitting. Some babies sit a bit earlier, some a little bit later, but if it's like at 8 months, 9 months, 10 months, you're thinking, this baby is taking very long to sit. That could be a red flag. So your norms are where the average falls, and then either side of that, you have your early or your later, and there can be many different reasons for that. So your factors that influence development are your DNA, how you are made to be, your environment and what you're exposed in. So it could be your nutrition, it could be your relationships, it could be what is physically in your environment. Are there things to climb over? Are you in one space all the time? What are you exposed to? And your personality. You have your extroverts, your introverts, and everything else in between, and your combinations, as well as Chantal was talking about, your sensory system. But she's done a good job of explaining that, so I don't need to do it. Okay. So we're going to look at physical development first. So physical development, what we see in the very early years, 0 to 3, is your gross motor skills. So you all had to stand up, you all had to move your arms and touch your toes. You used a lot of your gross motor abilities, so your big movements, your large muscle groups, and big movement patterns. So to touch your nose was a small movement pattern, but to reach up high and touch your toes, that's a big movement pattern. So in the first 3 years, 0 to 3, is when a lot of this is your foundation phase. So that development happens at a very fast rate in the first 3 years. So you have a baby who doesn't move a lot. Initially, they love to sleep. Then they start reaching up. Then they just kick and they explore with their body. Then they learn to roll, to sit, to crawl, to walk, to climb as they get bigger and bigger, and then you get to jumping, hopping, and moving, climbing over things and under things. So that's the foundation of learning movement patterns and using those big body movements. They initially are very clumsy, and you'll have a child who often overhits or doesn't throw in the right direction or jumps off a bit harder or softer because they're exploring with their movement and what their body can do. And also in this time, the interesting thing is you need big body movements in order to help you develop small muscle movement. So if you think of your fingers and your hands, in your first 3 years is when a lot of your fine motor development happens as well. So you need your big movement to develop strength in your stomach, in your arms, and your balance, so that when you are working with something small, you actually have control. Because if you don't have strength or control here, it's very hard to do a tiny movement. So if you think you're going to reach down and pick up a tiny speck of dirt off the ground, but you're standing on one leg, you're really going to overbalance, and it's really hard to pick it up. So that's because you don't have the strength or the position to base yourself. But if you were standing with 2 feet or sitting and you bent over and reached for it, you'd pick it up a lot easier. So it's your gross motor, your big body movements, as well as your fine movements. And babies, you'll notice, they'll just swat at something and it's more like, oh, there was a reaction. But they can't really do a buttonhole. But by 5, 6 and older, they can do buttonholes. So that's your development of large movements and gaining control of fine movements. Okay, so you're a preschooler, 3 years to 6 years old. So here, they suddenly look like they're going into proportion. They suddenly grow taller, they get a little bit thinner, they're playing 24/7, they're constantly moving, and babies tend to have really big heads, but between 3 and 6, that comes into proportion because now their body has grown and they've gotten stronger, so it comes a bit more proportional. So then they really start exploring with their movement. How high can they jump? How far can they hop? How fast can they run? Can they aim at a target and kick a soccer ball? So there's a lot more control that comes along, but there's a lot more confidence that comes with their body movements as well. And they also get better at their fine motor movements. So they want to do their zippers, they want to do their buttons, they want to feed themselves. It can be irritating because they take much slower. And especially when you're in a hurry, it's very frustrating. But it's a really good skill. And that's how we learn, by trying, by practicing and doing it ourselves. So, they gain a lot of independent skills with their fine motor skills in that 3 to 6 age. And they also start learning to, for example, control scissors and control crayons and pencils, and to learn how to manipulate something to do what they want it to do. Okay, from 6 to 12 years, there's an increased interest in specific things. So like sports, swimming, cricket, dancing, athletics, they can use their body a bit better. So now when they engage in a game that requires physical movement, they're more confident. And because of the explorations of what their body can do, they have a more channeled interest in what they like. So your little girl might like ballet, but your little boy is going to want to play soccer. Not stereotypical, but it can, that's what you would sort of expect. And it's a time where that, just an overall, your 0 to 12 years is a great time to expose your children to a variety of movements. So lots of different movements, lots of sports, lots of activities. I don't mean in the sense of sign them up for absolutely everything at school, but in the sense that give them the opportunities to balance, walk on a beam, jump off a step, crawl underneath a tunnel, like climb over a log, play in the garden, jump, swing, do monkey bars, because all of these different movements, hanging upside down, swinging, build their idea of what their body is, where it is, and what can they do with their body, as well as the very physical aspects of developing strength, muscle strength, and developing their bones. Bones and muscle strength are really important, and a child who doesn't move will tend to have health issues later on, because when you're walking, you're pressing on, your gravity pulls you down and it creates pressure, so your bones compound together and they become strong. But without movement, your bones stay like a sponge, so then you're more prone to have like a broken limb or something like that. So it's really important to develop strength. It's important to develop strength in their bones as well, because that sets them up for life. Okay, so this is a fly-through of development, but we're moving on to cognitive development. So cognitive is your brain. So it's your thinking, it's your reasoning, it's your problem solving, it's learning consequences and reactions, it's learning concepts of math, language, and science. So in the early years, 0 to 3 years, it's very concrete. So they understand physical forms. This is hard, and it makes a sound. But this is water, it's liquid, and if I pour it out, it feels fun to play with. So your 0 to 3 years is a real exploration of what textures are, what is in the environment, what is the same, what is different. And learning that if I drop the bottle, or I let it out of my hand, it's actually going to fall, and it might break, and then the water is going to splash everywhere. So it's learning that there is a reaction to things that I do. So you'll notice a little child will want to repeat an activity. So if they've, say, hit a balloon, and it's tied to string and it kind of floats back to them, they'll want to do it again. So there's a lot of repetition, and they're learning, okay, if I hit this, it comes back to me, so that means I either have to move out of the way or I can hit it back. So there's a bit of combination and where the cognitive also joins with the physical to understand, okay, if I do this, this happens. This happens to me, but also if I think it, I know what to expect this property to do. They also learn a lot about he, she, who's mom, who's dad, who's grandma, so different personalities. They learn about themselves, that they are independent people. They are not still part of mommy, so I am independent. So I can say yes and no. And you know the word that they learn first is always no. So if I can say no, and there's a reaction, because either then someone stops doing something, or mommy says, you have to do it. And they also learn their ups and downs. So now their physical movement of crawling under something now has a word. This is under. Oh, okay, so that's a position in space. And that is important because when they get to school, they now know how to form a letter or where to put it on the page, because it goes under, over, up, down, if you think of letter formation. Okay, so your preschooler, you're 3 to 6 years old. They want to know why. Why? They want to know, why does this do this? Why? Exactly. Because I said so. But they want to know, what is this and why do we do this? So they question everything, but that's how they're learning. And if you never question anything, do you really learn? You just go along. So that's their stage of cognitive development. Why does it do this? And you need to give them the opportunity to learn. So explain to them, quite matter-of-factly, it doesn't have to be complicated, simply explain why. So the sun looks yellow because it's a light and it shines, and that's why. You don't need to go into the scientific aspect of it, but it's just yellow, as an example. So, they love talking, they love sharing little stories and whatnot, so it's also a stage where they can learn to concentrate. So reading them stories, reading them books, they're able to follow along, they're following a story, they're gaining an understanding of how to put together a sentence, how to concentrate. So your 3 to 6 years, always remember that it's a minute per age. So some 3-year-olds can really focus long and concentrate on a story or a book. But often there's the pictures, you discuss it, so there's a lot to keep them engaged. But they will lose attention quite quickly because they're only 3. But your 12-year-old will be able to concentrate much longer than your 3-year-old. So just be aware that there are differences, but each time, each year, and each experience builds on the last one. So then you have your 6 to 12-year-olds. This is where they explore and they test ideas. So they still ask a lot of why, but they want to know, okay, you said this, I'm going to try it to see if you were actually right. Did it work? Did it not work? They still ask lots of questions, but it's a condensing stage of creativity. So your ability to be creative is really explored and developed between the ages of 0 and 12. After that, a lot of what you learn and how you create is based on what you've learned previously on the foundation. So they can be very creative. If they're doing an art project, they want to use a variety of materials and see what happens when they manipulate it. So it's very much about a process. It's not always about the end product. It's about, how did I do this? What did I use? And how did I get it to do what I wanted it to do? So yes, they get a reward from the outcome, but it's a lot of exploring and a lot of testing. This is the stage where you see growth in reading, writing, and math skills. So they start learning that at school. It's also a time when you'll often find the teachers start spotting things, and they'll say, this child's struggling to form their letters, or this child is really struggling to get the concept of a number or form or whatnot. And when you start looking into it, this is the stage that OTs spend a lot of time with, actually, because the teachers start wondering, like, the child can't form a letter, so why can't they form a letter? Then we have to look back at their foundation and say, okay, they don't have any position in space. So position in space is that I am standing next to the table. So if you want to do a letter, say a B or a D, B or D, you have your line and it goes next to your curve. But if you don't have position in space, which side of the curve, which side of the line do you put it, and how close do you put it to the next letter? How far? Do you put it high above the line or below the line that you're supposed to write on? So that's where your physical movement from the early years of crawling under something and over something and knowing that my body is standing next to something actually informs your ability to learn to read and write. They also learn to talk quite a lot in those years as well. I had a friend say to me, yeah, you spent all your early years trying to teach your children to talk and the rest of your life to tell them to be quiet. And it's true. But that's how we learn. We communicate through our words. Okay, so our emotional and social development. So emotional regulation and identifying feelings. There has been a bit mentioned about this already, but specifically in your early years, emotions and feelings and learning how to regulate them can seem quite daunting for a parent to teach your child, but also those emotions are felt really big and real. So on top of our physical environment and what we're learning in our mind, we have an internal response. Things make us feel sad, angry, happy. And for a child, especially 0 to 3 years, that's a time when you really explore and help them identify what those emotions are. So I'm angry now because I can't do something, but that doesn't mean I just throw everything off the table and kick everything. That's how they feel and what they want to do, but this is a time where we start teaching them how to manage that. So yes, they can go to their room and punch their pillow in a quiet, calm, safe environment, but we're not going to do that and punch your brother because he took your toy. That's not socially appropriate, and it's hurtful and it's not safe. So teaching children how to identify their emotions and how to handle it and what to do with it. It's not easy when they're having a temper tantrum. So the best time is to remove them from their environment, give them a space where they can calm down, and then you deal with it. And then you can talk to them about, oh, you're feeling angry or you're feeling frustrated. This is how we manage it. So in the 0 to 3 years, that's a lot of what they learn about how to regulate their emotions and their feelings is through their attachment to their caregivers. So the early years is a very dependent stage, so that 0 to 3, and if you think of a first year as well, they're completely dependent on you for all their care. So they learn to trust, they learn to love, they learn to form an attachment with this person, and they learn about strangers and friends, who is a stranger, who is a friend. And they learn, I am a different person, so I can, and this is mine. So that development is where you guide them as to knowing, okay, if this is yours, this is theirs, this is how you can trust this person in your environment, and this is how we deal with strangers in our environment. So that's often the foundation of how they learn to relate to people later on in life. So your 0 to 3 years is also a stage of learning turn taking. Now, sharing is really, really hard, and especially for a 3-year-old, because they don't have an understanding of how someone else feels. They know how they feel, and they know what they want and like and dislike, but the idea of thinking that someone else has emotions is also quite an abstracted idea. It's not concrete, because they can't feel how you're feeling. So turn taking, just giving that opportunity to say, okay, my turn to throw the ball, your turn to throw the ball. That lays a foundation of when sharing comes along a little bit later. So your preschooler, you're 3 to 6 now, this is when they can learn sharing. It comes along a bit better because now they're identifying, okay, I don't want to share this, but I'm happy to share that. So I can allow my friend, and I want my friend to play with me, so I can give them a turn with my toy. So that's when you find sharing really comes along, because they're also a little bit more mature and they've got over that point of feeling their emotions as strong, not as strongly, they're still strong, but not as strongly, so they can now understand that someone else has the same feeling. And that's when sharing comes along a lot better. They learn to express their feelings in relationships with others. They learn to identify strong feelings such as love, fear, and anger, and how to cope with them. And they also grow in their self-esteem. So if they're feeling afraid, they're not going to be very bold. But if they're in a situation where they feel loved and supported, then they're going to be confident. So the 3 to 6 is also where they learn to be confident in themselves so they can actually perform better and learn better when they're a bit older. They cope with change a lot better, and a lot of children learn to separate from their parents more in that stage, that 3 to 6 year stage. So that's when they start going to school. So although in our society today we often have to leave our children from 4 months in a childcare environment, and it's really important that that childcare environment has someone who that child can attach to and feel safe and comfortable in that setting. Because at 3 to 6, that's really when they can learn to detach from their parents and start interacting more with the world around them, and they become a bit more confident. So your school age, this is your forming peer groups. So my friends like Paw Patrol, so I like Paw Patrol. Like, they want to do what their friends want to do. They take a little bit more responsibility for their behavior, so you now have to sit down and do your homework. That's really tricky, but if you give them some responsibility, if you don't do your homework, your teacher's going to be cross with you tomorrow, so they want to do their homework. So there's a little bit more of an understanding of consequences and actions. They learn the difference between right and wrong, and they often tend to have a very strong sense of justice. So if their friend has done something wrong, they're going to tell everybody about it, and they'll come tell you, Mommy, so-and-so did this, da-da-da-da. So they the line between right and wrong is very clear for them. And that's a way that you can negotiate and show children, okay, that was wrong, but we don't necessarily have to go tattletale, but this is how we deal with the wrong, or this is how we respond to it. Their feelings of fear might decrease, but we're seeing it quite commonly now that the feelings of stress are increasing, just because of the demands of a child for their academic achievement and the expectations of their parents and the way our society is driven at the moment. There's quite an increase on stress. So you want to reduce that by increasing your child's self-esteem and helping them to deal with those stresses and helping them to negotiate it so that you can decrease that a bit. So, red flags. I'm not going to go into all the red flags, but what I am going to say is follow your gut. Sometimes you can say, there's something just not right here. So in terms of that, then go investigate. So you don't have to jump to conclusions, but go investigate. Go ask someone for advice. Go see what the developmental norms are. So especially if it's your child or a child in your class, you're just feeling that something's not right. It's okay to feel that, but before you act on that, go find out. So ask a professional, ask a leader, a teacher, somebody who you can trust, and say, I'm concerned about these things because it doesn't seem like typical development on what I'm seeing in everybody else. And then you'll be able to identify and refer, and without making judgments and assumptions, check yourself first. So follow your gut, find out information first, and then act. Don't judge that a child has just got a problem when you don't know the full story. But a lot of times we just label a child and we don't follow the concern that we think there's something here, and then that poor child gets left behind or misses out on an intervention that could really, really help them. So be aware and keep observing. So outside on the info desk, there is a checklist from 0 to 5-year-olds you can collect on when you leave. It's information on what the developmental milestones are and what are red flags specifically. And there's also a document that's going to be emailed to you, again, with some more in-depth information. I don't have time to go into all the other details, but If you are concerned, please always ask someone. There's a lot of information out there about what norms are and what typical things you can find at this age, and that age. Majority of it is between 0 to 6-year-olds, so there's not a lot of information between 6 to 12. But often if a child is in school, a teacher will be concerned about something. So be open. If you're the parent and the teacher presents a concern, please be open to investigating and finding out what your child needs, because between 6 and 12, when they develop their skills and they learn, you want them to do it as confidently as possible. So give them that opportunity to have an intervention that will help them for their future. And if you are concerned, you're welcome to contact one of the OTs or somebody else here today. Okay. You can contact me as well. I am one of the OTs. Thank you.